Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. Right through the weekend, the Aam Aadmi Party seemed torn apart by its internal differences. Letters between its quarreling leaders were plastered all over the front pages. But now the party claims the divisions are healed. Is that really the case, or is that just for public consumption? Joining me now, the Aam Aadmi Party leader, Yogendra Yadav. Yogendra Yadav, let's start with your personal relationship with Arvind Kejriwal. On Saturday, he tweeted calling you a very dear friend, a very valued colleague. So is your personal relationship restored to what it was before political differences came in the way?
It never went down. You see, there are personal relationships and there are professional judgments. There are larger political judgments. You and I can enjoy perfect relationship and yet disagree. And to my mind, the quality of democracy or quality of an organization is where you can articulate differences despite being best of friends.
I come to the differences you articulated, but you're already saying to me that none of the things you said about Arvind, his leadership or the impact of his leadership on decision making had any effect on your personal relationship? None at all?
This was not the first time Arvind heard about it. We've been discussing that in the organization. We've been talking about it. It's just that I happened to write it. And please do remember, I did not write an article for Times of India. This was an internal communication, which somehow someone got sense of. I mean, this happens all over political parties.
What about your personal equation with Manish Sisodia? He accused you of what he calls the politics of letter writing. He suggested that you were wanting to finish off the party. He even suggested you wanted to finish off Arvind. Is all of that forgotten, or have you decided to put it behind you?
Look, people have all kinds of style. I think form is not all that important. Substance is. I have a certain way of conducting myself in public, which appears too polite, over polite. People say you're not meant for politics, really.
He certainly didn't seem polite when he accused you of wanting to finish off Arvind.
That's what I'm saying. I have one style. Other colleagues have different, and clearly my style cannot become the mandated style sheet for Aam Aadmi Party.
But did his style upset you?
It does hurt. It hurts to read a letter like this. But then, you know, you look at the larger point being made, you look at the larger conversations, and clearly he was also not writing for media. I mean, I was not writing for Times of India, and he was not writing a public letter.
Is that hurt today behind you, or does it still rankle?
In public life, in politics, this kind of hurt is a very routine affair. This is nothing compared to what I experienced during the campaign. The kind of personal, very deep and low-grade accusations that I faced.
You've developed a thick skin.
Not quite. And I wish I could, not quite. But you see, I've been in some kind of public life for nearly 3 decades now.
Stick to Manish Sisodia. I'll talk about public life later.
No, but I said I've got used.
You're saying you've forgotten what he said. Have you forgiven what he said?
I think the point he made was that this kind of letter would damage the overall interests of the party. Now, that's a point to make. I really wish he had not put it in that language, and I'm absolutely sure if he knew this could be released in public, he wouldn't possibly write in this kind of language.
I'll move on in a moment's time, but you do agree that his language could have been better chosen and less hurtful and perhaps less personal?
I'm sure he would agree with you.
Would you agree with me?
Yes, I mean, I personally don't use this kind of style. I wish people don't use it, but it happens. You see, it happens in a moment. People are very angry. Maybe he was too short of time. Something made him write this. And clearly he did not know. I did not know that these were going to be plastered all over.
Let's then come to the issues you raised in your letter. And for many, the key issue is in fact to do with Arvind Kejriwal. You suggested he was a supremo, not a leader. You said the party is falling prey to the disease of a personality cult. More importantly, you said major decisions in the party appear to, and indeed do, reflect the wishes of one person. When he changes his mind, the party changes its course of action. Proximity to the leader comes to substitute for organizational roles and responsibilities. And then you added, the real question is whether there are limits to the personal discretion of the leader. Today, do you stand by all of that, or have you changed your mind?
No, I do stand by those questions. I raised those questions because those were real questions, because I wanted my colleagues to address those questions, and I'm very happy that those questions were discussed. Just think of it, Karan. If this was a letter written by a BSP MP about Mayawati, a letter written by a congressman about Rahul Gandhi, or in BJP about Narendra Modi, where would that person be in the party?
Now that's another matter. your party is different. I don't think you set your standards by comparison to the
I'm
BJP.
glad you agree. This is a different kind of party where you can write about these things, and this is a real issue to be discussed.
And that's why I want to...
that's a disease of our political culture. And every party gets afflicted.
That's
Someone needs to say.
I want to explore with you what you wrote. You do today still believe that Arvind Kejriwal has a tendency to be a supremo, not a leader.
No, that's not what you read. What you read
You suggested that he was a supremo, not a leader.
You could read that again. There are two different things. What I'm saying is that we as colleagues in the party are falling prey to a disease that's all over in Indian politics, which is personality cults. We need to be careful. In fact, the letter goes out of its way to suggest later, these are not faults of one person or someone else. I'm as much implicated in this as anyone else.
Just a moment. When you say the party is falling prey to the disease of a personality cult, that is Arvind Kejriwal you're talking about.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And when you say that major decisions appear to and indeed reflect the wishes of one person, that's Arvind Kejriwal you're talking about.
There's no doubt. This is written, that Arvind is the person being talked about. There is no doubt. The question is whether I'm saying Arvind does it, Arvind forces us to do it, or am I saying this is a disease spreading all over the country, this is a part of our political culture, can we all be alert to it?
No, let me ask you a different question.
Karan, I can allow myself to be persuaded by every show, every argument you make, and the 10th time someone is persuaded, I would say, be careful, you've agreed with Karan 10 times. Are you persuaded by his argument, or are you being swayed away?
Let's not deflect.
This may not be your fault.
This is an important issue raised. What steps does the Aam Aadmi Party take to ensure that Arvind Kejriwal behaves as a leader, not as a supremo?
Once again, allow me to clarify. The question is not what Arvind does, what he wants to do.
I'm saying, what does your party propose to do to ensure that?
How we react to
Absolutely,
it,
that's what I'm asking.
receive
That's the question.
it, how we respond to it.
That's the question. What steps does the party propose to take to ensure the leader doesn't become a supremo? You need institutional checks to ensure it.
Yes, and that's what we discussed for 3 days in our national executive. At the end of it, remember, there is a press conference. In any other party, it's the person who wrote the letter who would have been apologizing.
But you're not answering my question. I'm asking you, what are the steps you propose to take?
I am answering your question. If you listen to my answer, in any other party, the person who wrote a letter like this would have been apologizing, saying, actually, I wrote it in a dream, I was asleep, I must have wrong something. Here, the person who's being accused of all that says, Yogendra Yadav has a point, we want to learn. And in many of these situations, pointing this out and making public, public, which is to say within the party, debate on it itself is beginning of a remedy.
Only because the point. But just a minute. That's only the beginning. You're saying that he acknowledges the problem, therefore that's the beginning.
Not just he, entire
I'm saying surely the party needs to put in place formal institutional checks to ensure that leaders become leaders and don't become supremos. Have you thought of those formal institutional checks?
Those formal institutional checks have always existed in the party's constitution.
But then they were overridden. How do you ensure they don't get overridden again?
That's what we discussed. That's why we reinforced those things. Our party's constitution clearly says national convener is appointed by the national executive and can be recalled by the national executive in any of its meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
The constitution says he will consult the PAC every time, which indeed it is consulted. So,
well, I'm not sure, because you're moving on to a second issue, which in fact in your letter you called the heart of the matter.
No,
that second
Karan,
issue.
Why are you not,
picking up on your point? You said
because you said it's the beginning, and I would agree. Yes, this is the beginning. All these things, the very fact that here is a political party that is willing to address something which no political party in this country addresses.
The party was
I thought you would say it's a great beginning.
No. I'm not here to praise you. The party was only willing to address it.
But you're not here to damn me.
No, I'm not damning you. I'm questioning.
So let's be factual.
I'm questioning you.
Yeah.
The party was willing to discuss it because you raised it. It didn't come up voluntarily. It was brought up earlier by Ilyas Azmi in a different form in May, and he was ignored. So when Yogendra Yadav brought it up, you forced the party to discuss it. Now what I'm asking is, having discussed it, what steps do they propose to take to ensure that the wishes of one person don't become major decisions of the party? I'm quoting your letter. Surely concrete steps would have been discussed. Give me 2 or 3 of those.
reiterating constitutional provisions and resolving that we will stick by constitutional propriety of our own constitution. You don't need any additional protections
Well, you
than that.
do, because those constitutional provisions were always there and they were ignored or overridden or not followed. Now you're simply saying, trust us, we'll follow them. You didn't follow them earlier. Why would trust be sufficient this time around to ensure you follow them now?
Karan, in a political organization, you remind your colleagues of certain values. Everyone sits back and says,
Is a
yes,
reminder enough?
You're right.
Is a reminder enough?
If the reminder is not enough, if collective reflection is not enough, collective introspection is not enough, then we should not exist as colleagues. We should be doing something else.
I'm coming close to suggesting that the differences are such that that may end up being the outcome, but let me not jump my own gun. Let me take up something that you called in your letter the heart of the matter. And that was, as you put it, the decision-making process in the party. You said that quite often the PAC has a concentration of power in its hands which was not envisaged in your constitution. You also said that often people who are not members of the PAC seem to be attending PAC meetings and deliberating and being part of the decision. And then finally you said quite often the PAC is also bypassed and overruled. First of all, do your colleagues agree with that three-part diagnosis?
If they had not agreed with the substance of what I was saying, I should have been thrown out of the organization. Clearly, we had discussion. Now, this is not for me to give you instances of this because I did not write it for you. This was written for my colleagues. They saw it. They must have seen some point in what I was doing. And yes, we evolved internal procedures to tackle these problems.
What are those internal procedures that will ensure A, that there's no concentration of power in the PAC, and then B, and this may sound contradictory, that the PAC isn't bypassed or overruled? What will ensure those two
No,
things?
they're not contradictory. They follow the same thing. PAC should not be bypassed and overruled by someone else, but it can be overruled by the National Executive, which is the fundamental authority.
But what steps have been taken to ensure that won't happen?
We have resolved that the National Executive should meet at regular intervals. It's actually meeting next month again.
Okay.
Meeting at regular intervals. That PAC decisions are more formalized and recorded, as they ought to be.
They weren't previously recorded?
They were recorded not in a formal way. Do remember, Karan, we are a very young political party which is evolving conventions, and it is precisely letters like this which help evolve it. It happens in every party, except that the letters don't reach the press.
So two steps have been taken. One, the National Executive will meet more regularly,
yes,
and in some sense vet and check on PAC decisions. And
yes,
secondly,
there is a constitutional provision that every PAC decision has to be ratified by the National Executive.
And that will be now observed more fully.
That's right.
And secondly, you will also ensure that PAC decisions are recorded more fully.
They are recorded properly. Yeah, we are learning. I have no hesitation in saying, Karan, that we are learning. The only thing, Karan, is that in this party, you get to see these differences, these questions and so on. I would like to see how many parties in this country follow any of these things.
I think the Aam Aadmi Party's unique significance is its difference from others. I don't think we should compare you to others to justify your lapses.
As long as you agree with that, we can continue.
Myself.
Yeah, we can continue the dialogue. I'm happy. I'm happy.
Now,
we have higher norms to live up to.
Let me get back to your letter because time is of the essence. The third thing you mentioned in your letter is that much of the organization is in a state of chaos. You said there is no clear chain of command and the state leadership is often confused about how to get in touch with the center and take critical decisions. What remedies do you propose to tackle that?
You would have noticed that at the end of the 3-day conference, we have our National Executive meeting, we have decided to revamp the entire organization. A committee has been formed under the leadership of Prithvi Reddy, which would look into all these things and which would also, more importantly, revamp the organization bottom up, which is to say build the booth level committee and build the organization from there, because many of the problems arose because we are, as an organization, believe in bottom up philosophy, but the party had to be made quickly in a short time and we could not actually develop the party the way it should have developed.
I understand. A whole revamp of the organization is intended. Now, when you revamp an organization in the light, and this is critical, in the light of the points you've made, laymen like me from the outside say that this surely suggests that your national convener Arvind Kejriwal has not been terribly successful in leading the party. These problems, that he's appearing as a supremo rather than a leader, his wishes seem to become the major decisions, right? There is no limit or circumscription around his discretion, suggests that maybe you need a new national convener. Have you considered changing the leader?
You seem to have an agenda here.
I don't have an agenda.
You don't have,
asking an upfront question.
Okay. My letter actually answers it. The simple answer is that in this party there is no contestation about the leadership and national convener.
That's loyalty.
Because
I'm saying that that's loyalty. I'm saying
not
your
loyalty.
letter suggests
the letter actually
problems that may need a radical solution, a new national convener.
Karan, this is your reading of my letter.
Absolutely.
But my
undeniably.
my letter clearly says something. Please read that as well. It's right in front of you, which actually says Arvind Kejriwal richly deserves to be where he is. Okay. Without him, the movement would not have been where it is. He is an extraordinary leader, and every extraordinary leader also needs feedback, which he's getting. He's willing to take it. So where does this question come up? And about not building the organization bottom up, I doubt if anyone could have done that in 18 months.
All right. Let me then bring up something else. In response to your letter, your colleague Manish Sisodia accused you of hypocrisy. He said, so long as Arvind was listening to you, you were full of praise of him. He alleges that when you started to request action taken against Naveen Jain and Arvind refused or demurred, you began to call Arvind dictatorial and autocratic. He says you're being hypocritical.
I read that letter. As I said, it's written in anger. I've clarified again and again, and as you can see the letter and you can see the response. Does my letter say anything about Haryana? Does it say anything about this colleague Naveen, who is a bright young person there?
So this is an unfair comment made by Manish Sisodia.
I don't think he was able to read my letter in a hurry. Because this is a non-issue as far as I am concerned, and the National Executive has taken no decision.
You put it beautifully, not able to read my letter in a hurry. What you really mean is, he didn't understand your letter.
No, I didn't say that, did I?
And I'm asking if that's what you really mean.
If at all that was an issue for me, I would have demanded a resolution of that issue in this National Executive, and that issue did not even come up.
Something else.
I insisted on a few points, and those are the only points that got discussed. So the final proof that my resignation had nothing to do with the events in Haryana is that those events were not discussed in the National Executive at all.
Now, in fact, Manish Sisodia, in his letter, did bring up Haryana, and he suggested quite blatantly that you had perhaps misled the party by projecting a better outcome. His exact allegation was that a survey was done after the resignation of the Delhi government, which suggested that your party would get 23% of the votes in Haryana. You ended up getting just 3%, and he suggests, or he insinuates, that you misled the party by making false projections.
When a party does not do very well, those who have leadership roles must accept responsibility, and of course I must. I was given leadership role in Haryana. My own assessment is that I could not do justice to that, and in any case I must accept responsibility.
But did you mislead the party?
The point about survey is simply mistaken. The survey happened at the peak in January, and in January our ratings in Delhi, if you remember, were 55% up and above. Our surveys showed nearly 60% vote share for our party in Delhi. We finally came to 33.
Except that he says the survey happened after the fall of the Delhi government, which suggests it happened sometime in February.
That's inaccurate.
He's inaccurate.
That's inaccurate. It happened at the peak of our party's popularity in the month of January. This is when our popularity in Delhi was nearly 60%. Our popularity even in Uttar Pradesh was nearly 6 or 7%. In every one of those we came down, and that's a larger story that happened to us in this
another
election.
set of insinuations. I hesitate to use the word accusation about you. He says, or he suggests, that you forced Arvind to field you from Gurgaon as a parliamentary candidate. He suggests that you pressurized Arvind to make you the party in charge in Haryana. He suggests that you coerced Arvind into contesting more widely through the country, whereas Arvind only wanted to concentrate on Delhi. All of those are charges that he makes in his letter about you.
That's why I thought he wrote that letter in a hurry. If he had taken time, he would have remembered all the things, because the decision about going big is a decision that was a unanimous decision of the National Executive, taken in everyone's consent and so on. So that's why, the point
is, he targeting you on purpose?
Karan, can I ask you another question? You have chanced upon an internal communication in a political party. That's lovely. It's from media point of view, if I was in media, I would find it lovely if I got 3 letters exchanged by congressmen, by BJP, by whatever. What are these letters talking about? Are they talking about some money being exchanged?
No.
Are they about corruption?
Can I answer that
are they
question?
about fixing?
Can I answer that question?
Even in their
can
private...
I answer that question?
No, let me just complete. Even,
you asked me the question,
yeah,
what are
but
they talking about?
let me put the question. The question is, even in their private communication, not meant for any public thing, they are talking about Swaraj principles and so on.
No, they're doing something more than that. Forgive me. First of all, they are suggesting that the leader is a supremo. Secondly, they're suggesting that in fact his wishes become the major decisions of the party. Thirdly, they're saying that when he changes his position, the party changes course. In other words, they're suggesting that the man at the top is autocratic and the party is not functioning democratically, and that man is imposing his will. The second thing these letters suggest is a deep fissure of discord between two senior members, you and Manish, and the fact that Manish, as you put it, is in fact resorting to either mistruths or untruths to suggest you've done things and coerced Arvind when you haven't. He's also suggesting you misled the party by making false projections. Now, these are much more than just democratic discussions. We're talking here about deep fissures, A, to do with the leader and your comments about his behavior and his control, and secondly, your relationship with Manish.
On the first part, it simply shows that a person who's writing to his colleagues is concerned about the principle of Swaraj. The point that you made, he's saying, why don't we practice Swaraj more fully in our party? That is the essence of what I'm saying.
You're saying it with relation to the way the leader behaves, and so you're suggesting that the leader is by implication autocratic,
Karan,
dictatorial.
it so happens that point 7 of my letter excites you most, but it's point 7.
How could
and
it
the letter
possibly not?
itself, the letter itself summarizes. Karan, the letter itself summarizes what the letter is all about, and you've just read it. It says it is about the principle of Swaraj, which is so dear to us. Just
read to this. The real question is whether there are limits to personal discretion of the leader. You only ask that question because there are no limits. You only ask that question because that personal discretion is becoming a dictate and therefore pushing the party against what the party as a whole may want, or what might be in the best interest of the party, only because the leader wants it. You're raising fundamental issues to do with Arvind's leadership.
I'm glad you think these are fundamental questions, and the real fundamental question here is about decision making in a democratic way. And as long as you agree that in our private conversations we are asking fundamental questions and not engaging in wheeling dealing, trade, fixing with this businessman, jostling for post, as long as in a party leaders in their private squabbles talk about larger principles, I'm all right with that party.
Okay,
at least I am. You may not.
I agree with you. You've raised a fundamental question about the absence of democratic decision making in your party.
Karan, you can read
and the
the
second
letter.
thing is, behind that fundamental question actually do lie deep fissures. Whether you call them squabbles, I don't know, but deep fissures between you and Manish. And I would suspect, even though you've denied it, deep differences between you and Arvind, but I admit you denied it.
No, Karan, since you have been so kind to read my letter, wouldn't it be fair to allow my letter to speak for itself? Allow it to speak. It's now on the website. Allow the letter to speak for itself.
Absolutely.
And please do not reduce the entire letter to its point number 7. I know media is excited by personalities, but that's not what all there is to it. You are right to say it raises fundamental questions about democracy. Please do remember it's a problem that cuts across all the parties.
Absolutely.
And fortunately, isn't it fortunate that there is a party in this country where this is being talked about, it is being discussed.
It's very fortunate it's being talked about.
Yeah.
But behind the, and I won't say facade, but behind the subject of democratization, behind the subject of a leader being a supremo, behind the subject of his wishes becoming the major decisions, actually is a deep concern about the fact that this party is not democratic, and there's something about the functioning of the leader that prevents it. Unfortunately, at that terrible point, we've run horribly out of time. I want to thank you for coming.
Just one point I want
Very
to
quickly
make, which is, I understand that lots of people are very keen to write obituary of Aam Aadmi Party.
I'm not writing the
you are
obituary.
not one of. You are certainly not one of them, Karan. How could I possibly?
I take you
suggest
seriously,
that?
which is why I'm questioning you.
But all I can say is, we'll disappoint them. Aam Aadmi Party is here to stay. It represents a hope, and we would not allow that hope to die.
In the hope of Indian democracy, I too believe you ought to disappoint them, and I hope you will. But you've got a long way before you do. At the moment, Skepticism is what's rising in people's minds. My thanks to you for coming to join me.
Always welcome.
And my thanks to you for answering my questions. There we end this particular episode. You have been. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.